The New Balance Minimus TR V2. So 3 things to like about this model. Number 1, if you like more flexible and minimalist feeling training shoes, this can be a good option to look into. So despite it having a higher drop, which I'll talk about in a second, and not necessarily resembling the old school minimalist models like I was kind of hoping this model would, it does still have a minimalist feel. So if you do like lower stack heights in your training shoes and shoes that have a lot more articulation, especially through the midfoot and forefoot, you will enjoy and resonate with this model. The second thing to like with this shoe is New Balance made the midfoot a lot better than the TR and the TR BOA. Both of those models broke on me when doing rope climbs about 2 weeks into using and testing those. This model has been stellar thus far. We now have a lateral and medial wrap here on the midfoot, gives you a lot more bite, and then also this lighter synthetic overlay. I actually thought it was going to be a little bit problematic, but it's held strong thus far. So the midfoot construction in the TR V2 is a lot better, especially in the context of CrossFit. So if you do want that minimalist training shoe for lifting in CrossFit, I do think this model can be a good bet regarding overall durability of the midfoot compared to the last 2 TR models. The third thing to like about this shoe is if you are a fan of more low profile shoes and you like shoes that have a more sock-like fit to them that feel a bit more athletic, that's where I think the shoe can also resonate and fit really well with your needs. We have a low volume forefoot and midfoot. The boot is relatively low as well. It almost kind of reminds me of the silhouette of the old school Nike Metcons. Now, not necessarily with the toe box and the heel, which I'll talk about in my cons, but in the context of just the overall shape of the shoe and the silhouette, it does kind of have some resemblance to those models. So if you do resonate with that style of footwear as well regarding your training shoe once, I think you will enjoy the TR V2. It's a pretty well-rounded training shoe. It's worked thus far for my cross training, my sprints, my agility workouts and athletic focus workouts, CrossFit, etc. So it is very well-rounded. But now let's talk about a couple of cons that I have with this model. So 3 cons that I have with the TR V2 is number 1, I don't love the exposed stitching here around the forefoot. To be honest, I don't know why New Balance really made this feature in the shoe because it's already starting to scuff on me. Like, as you can see, like I'm already starting to have some fuzz here, and that's from doing burpees on rubber gym floors, which is going to be a common thing for folks who are doing CrossFit WODs and doing just CrossFit more regularly on a weekly basis. So if that is you, this is going to be something that's probably going to annoy you as well. I think that was an oversight. Like, you made the midfoot better for CrossFit workouts apparently, but why did you leave the forefoot stitching so able to be abused and just frayed up when you're doing any form of toe dragging? And if you are somebody who likes to train outdoors on concrete, for example, and you do prone to get up sprints, don't use this model. You are going to tear the crap out of the toe box. I don't love this feature. I think it's going to have long-term durability issues for folks. So again, like 2 steps forward with the midfoot, 1 step back with the forefoot here. The second con that I have with this shoe is I went with the 2E wide option in this model, and I still don't really find it to be wide enough. We have a pretty aggressive taper up here through the forefoot, and I think why I don't think this model feels wide enough is because I think it runs a little bit short to begin with. Now, I'll talk about the sizing of this shoe in my sizing and fit section, but I think if you are somebody with a medium to wider foot width, go with the wide option in this shoe and size up a half size to a full size if you have an exceptionally wide foot, because I think this model will feel a little bit snug for you. I was pretty bummed when I found that my foot didn't even feel like this was wide enough, and I don't have an exceptionally wide foot. I have an E to double E with foot width. My third con that I have with this shoe is the heel. Why do we have this material jutting out? It's so like egregious looking. We also have this like little TPU rubber layer back here. I get that that's designed for handstand push-ups, but do we need this huge shelf back here on the heel? It looks very platformy and just looks kind of chunky. It kind of dilutes like the whole overall aesthetic of the shoe in my opinion, because I think it does have a decent look to it until you get to this heel and you're like, what's going on back there? So while it's not necessarily a feature that I think is going to hinder performance as a whole, it is definitely a knock on the aesthetics of this shoe. And also with this little lip here, I'm actually curious if this is going to break down over time with abrasion or just a consistent use of friction, because it does kind of have like a sharp edge here. And we know when we have materials with sharp edges going over friction areas multiple times in a workout, that can have problems. Now, I haven't had issues yet, but definitely something to keep an eye on if you do invest in this model. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the heel though. What do you think of this heel? Am I being dramatic, or does it just kind of look chunky and weird and unneeded? But all that said, now let's talk about the performance of the TR V2. To break down the performance of the Minimus TR V2, I'll discuss how this model does for lifting, cross-training and CrossFit, short runs, and daily wear. So in the context of lifting, the stability of this shoe is great. So you have this fuel cell foam midsole. That is used in other models that New Balance produces. Generally, those models are designed for more HIIT and cross training or like more class focused workouts. So I was curious how it would feel in the shoe. I think because there is a lower stack height and they increase the density of it though, you're not gonna have stability issues in this shoe. You're gonna have a pretty low profile feel on the ground, and I never had issues when doing deadlifts, any form of machine work, or squats. Now, what I will say is you do have a pretty aggressive toe spring in the shoe. Even in my deadlift clips, you can kind of see how that toe floats until you start lifting, and then you have to kind of ground it, and you still have a little bit of lip there. So the toe spring is a little bit aggressive in this shoe. It feeds into the athleticism and the feel of the shoe in that context, but it does kind of take away from this model's ability to feel flat. If you were somebody who loved the old school Minimus models because they felt flatter and they had that zero drop, this is probably not going to resonate with you because the heel to toe drop in the shoe is now 4 millimeters. I think that's going to be great for a lot of lifters, but that does kind of move away from the original population who love the old school Minimus models for that zero drop construction and that flatter feel. So keep that in mind if you are buying the shoe for lifting. In the context of cross training and CrossFit, I have really enjoyed this shoe for the most part. It feels very athletic. It has a lot of articulation, a lot of bounce, and if you're doing like sprint work or any form of agility work or plyometric, this model feels great because with that toe spring, you kind of feed into that forefoot and that springiness. So I do like that shoe for that context, and it is pretty lightweight with its upper construction. I do kind of wish the tongue had a gusset because it can slide around in this style of workout. Honestly, you could probably put this as a con, but this tongue does have a little bit of an issue when you're doing lateral work if you don't crank the laces down. So definitely something that I think New Balance could improve on in the future iteration of this model when it comes to lateral work or any form of multi-directional work and having more tongue security. Plus, not to mention, because this tongue is a lighter weight and it does have a lot of stretch to it, I would say be very conscious of how you're pulling it on and adjusting. If it does slide on you, try to pull it with both sides to get it to lay flat versus pulling on one, because that could be an issue regarding long-term durability. For CrossFit, this model has done a really good job. My only knock against it is this upper toe box construction here. I think you're gonna have some fraying if you're doing a lot of burpees or any form of friction on the toe box of your shoe. So definitely keep an eye on that. When it comes to short runs, this model runs more dense. And so if you like a more minimalist feel with your running shoes or shoes that you like to run in, you will be fine in this model if you're tacking on some sprints, some shorter interval runs, or even like a mile or 2 miles. Now, if you're planning on doing a lot of running, this model is not going to feel the most comfortable. Plus, with this blocky heel, it just kind of takes away the performance of the shoe's potential to work for longer runs. So all that said, if you're doing short runs and interval runs, this model can work, especially if you're a forefoot or midfoot striker. But for long runs or slower pace runs, I don't necessarily love this shoe. When it comes to daily wear, I'm torn on this model because I like the flexibility and the breathability of it, but my gripe with it is because I feel like it runs a little bit narrow on the toe box and it runs short. I just find it to be incredibly uncomfortable for all day wear and walking. Maybe if I sized up a half size, that would change my mind, but all that said, I went true to size in this model. They never said size up, and I find it to be a little bit uncomfortable because I feel like I'm hitting the end of my toe box constantly in this shoe, even though it's broken in and when I wear thinner socks. So for daily wear, I think the shoe can be okay if you get the right size or if you size up. But for most folks who want more width, this might be a shoe that you just wear for your workouts and then call it quits after that. So when it comes to the price of the New Balance Minimus TR V2, you can expect to pay $120. Personally, I like the price point for this shoe. It's nice that New Balance didn't increase the price to $140, $150, etc., like some of the other big companies out there. So I think if you are looking for that all-in-one shoe that costs under $130, this can be a good option to look into. Just once again, be conscious of some of the durability concerns that I have with this shoe, and you'll get way more out of their lifespan. All right, so now let's answer the question, who should buy the New Balance Minimus TR V2? So number one, if you're somebody who likes a more minimalist feeling training shoe, despite this model having a 4mm drop, I think you will enjoy this shoe. It is very lightweight. It breaks in really fast. You have a lot of articulation in this model, so it does kind of still have essence of the OG Minimus shoes in that context. The second person that I think will resonate with this shoe is anybody who wants that more low profile silhouette with their training shoe. If you like a shoe that has a more sock-like fit to it, this model will work really well for your needs. And the third context is if you're somebody who wants a training shoe for cross-training and athletic focus workouts with some lifting and CrossFit sprinkled in, this can be a really good option to look into, assuming that you keep an eye on that durability and this model fits your foot anatomy really well. Now, who shouldn't buy this shoe? If you love the OG Minimus models and you like that 0mm drop construction, this is not going to be the best model for your needs. Once again, this model has a 4mm drop. It is not going to feel similar to those old school models, and we do have a pretty aggressive toe spring in this shoe. The second context is if you have an exceptionally wide foot, I don't even think the wide option in this model is going to fit for your needs. And if you have to size up just to fit into a shoe, I would say probably look into other options, because that means you're trying to fit kind of like a square peg into a round hole. So it's probably not going to be the best option for your foot anatomy. The third context is if you're somebody who is just annoyed by tongues moving, and also you're just worried about that upper durability, just pass on this shoe. So if you're a little bit more frugal with your shoe purchase and you want that shoe that's going to last and you're not going to have to mess with, you can just kind of put on, set, and forget, this might not be the best option for you as well, because again, there are just little oversights with this shoe that I think will annoy certain folks who have OCD with certain parts of their shoe, like myself. So when it comes to the sizing and fit of the New Balance Minimus TR V2, this is a model that comes with a standard width and a 2E width. I went with a 2E width, and honestly, again, I find this model to run pretty snug for my foot anatomy, and I think that's because this model runs short. So that said, I would say if you have a medium to wider foot width, size up a half size. If you have an exceptionally wide foot, go up a full size. And if you have a narrower foot and you typically have room at the end of your toe box, you can probably get away going true to size. Honestly, I feel like most folks should just go with the 2E option versus the standard. I would be curious to see how narrow the standard actually is compared to this model. I didn't want to buy two because I thought that was kind of excessive, but all that said, size up a half size to a full size for most folks to play it safe in this shoe. So when it comes to the weight, heel, toe drop, and insole in the Minimus TR V2, for my size 10 model here, we have a weight of 9.50 ounces. This is much more lightweight compared to other cross training shoes. This model's heel to toe drop is now 4mm. It is no longer a zero drop training shoe, and this model does not have a removable insole. So if you do have thicker inserts, pass on this shoe in my opinion, because with the lower profile upper volume and the lack of insole already, I don't think you're going to necessarily have enough room in the shoe to give you clearance and enough comfort. All right, so now let's cover the construction of the New Balance Minimus TR V2. Looking at the upper in this shoe, you have a blend of mesh and textile materials. So through the forefoot into the midfoot, you have this kind of consistent mesh. You have a synthetic overlay around the toe box, and then you have this exposed stitching as I've talked about. I don't necessarily love this. As you can see, it's already starting to kind of fray on me. It just looks fuzzy and weird. I don't love it. I don't know why they did that with the shoe, but it's not my favorite feature. But you do have a light internal toe guard here to help give you additional support when training. Looking at the midfoot, you have these synthetic overlays here on the medial and lateral side. This is almost like a rubbery type of feel material, so it does give you additional bite when doing rope climbs. And then looking at the boot, you have some Minimus branding here on the medial side, and you have a slightly more rigid boot, but it's not overly aggressive. So if you like a really deep heel cup or aggressive heel cup at that, that's not going to be this shoe. As you can see, the boot does have a bit more flexibility, so it does give you a more athletic and lightweight fit, but again, you're not going to get as much ankle support with the shoe that you would get with other models. On the lateral side, you also have some New Balance branding. Looking at the midsole, you have the fuel cell foam midsole that runs throughout the entirety of the shoe. It does have a slightly lower stack height. As you can see, it's a bit more dense, so it's not super plush, and because there's less stack height, it does feel very stable when you're training. Back here on the heel, this material kind of juts out. I don't know why they made it so aggressive. Like, this sticks out farther than my single finger width. That's insane. But that said, I think that's going to be a feature that's going to be very hit or miss. It's just one of those aesthetic things that I don't love with this shoe. You also have a TPU rubber overlay back here to give you additional slide support for handstand push-ups. And then looking at the outsole of this model, you have a rubber tread that runs throughout the entirety of this shoe's outsole. You have a herringbone tread up here in the forefoot and the heel, and then you have this more like diamond and rigid structure here through the midfoot for additional bite when rope climbing. You have a break here in the forefoot with some exposed foam, and then you have wraps here with this outsole on the lateral and medial side for additional rope climbing support. Once again, this model does not have a removable insole, and if you have additional questions on this model's construction or the nuts and bolts of this shoe for that matter, drop a comment down below. All right, y'all, that wraps up my review of the New Balance Minimus TR V2. There are things to like with this shoe, but then there are things that I would say are oversights regarding New Balance's construction features that they put into this model. Would I buy this shoe again? Probably not. I was hoping that this model would be a lot more like the OG Minimus, and it just doesn't deliver on that front. I don't love the fraying up here. It kind of looks gaudy. You can see that I'm already having some fuzzy toe box construction here. So all that said, while I do think the shoe can work for certain asks with the training shoe once, it's not my favorite model to date, and I think New Balance really missed the mark with this model regarding how they could deliver a really strong zero drop shoe and replicate that old school Minimus. We want that model, New Balance. Bring that model back, and I promise you, people will buy it. But all that said, if you have additional questions on this shoe, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, drop subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.